Good day, and welcome to the All Roads Lead to Akron Driving Tour, presented by Cadet Girl Scout Troop 30865. Many locations have a uniqueness about them. Paris has the Eiffel Tower, Arizona has the Grand Canyon, and among other highlights, Buffalo has chicken wings. We've decided to showcase all that's great about our small village of Akron, New York, and help you uncover many of the hidden treasures that have put it on the map. Throughout the tour, we will stop in numerous businesses, places, and even ruins to describe their significance and the roles they played, and continue to play, in defining our village for nearly 200 years. You may pause the tour at any time, and there will be several opportunities for you to get out of your vehicle and experience Akron firsthand. Please take this tour at your own risk and be mindful of the traffic around you. Look for the safest places to pull over and exit your vehicle. Please take time to notice the other architectural, historic, and cultural attributes that may not be part of this tour. When you hear a ding, it will alert you that we're beginning the narrative for a new location. Now get comfy, buckle your seatbelt, and find out why all roads lead to Akron.
To begin, we'd like to share a little history about the town of Newstead and just exactly how its humble beginnings resulted in the development of the remarkable village of Akron. In the early 1800s, a gentleman named Peter Van Den Mentor purchased land along the Old Buffalo Road, aka Route 5, and became the first settler in the town of Newstead. By the mid-1820s, it was evident that the town of Newstead, although in a beautiful area, was a difficult place to live, mainly due to its lack of water power. Several years after the settlement of Newstead, a gentleman named Jonathan Russell purchased land from the Ogden Land Company, making him the first settler in what was named the corporation, later to be named the village of Akron. Mr. Russell saw the many advantages this location had to offer, especially with the availability of running water from Murder Creek. Murder Creek, you say? It doesn't exactly sound like a place to plant a village, but that's exactly what happened. The powerful waters of Murder Creek were one of the many natural resources that made it an ideal place to live. We'll tell you more about how the creek got its name later in our tour.
Our tour begins where it all began back in the early 1800s. Please drive to destination number 1 as indicated on the map provided. This will be on John Street at the northeast corner of Russell Park. Please pull your vehicle over so you're parked across the street from the Denio Memorial Library. Russell Park should be on your right and the CD Right Center should be straight ahead of you. Your vehicle should be pointing uphill, facing east. We will be identifying several village features in this spot, so please put your hazard lights on or turn off your car if you wish. We'd like to draw your attention to the first site on our tour, Russell Park, located to your immediate right. As you may have guessed, this was part of the original land purchased by Jonathan Russell. He donated this 3-acre space to be used as a public park. Over the years, a rich history has unfolded within its boundaries. As you can see, there is a beautiful gazebo in the center of the park. This unique structure is actually built over the base of a fountain that was a centerpiece in the park for 50 years. The fountain was built in 1889 and boasted a statue of King Neptune, the Roman god of the sea, with a trident in hand and surrounded by water nymphs and dolphins. The limestone used to make the base came right from our village, but more about that later. In 1949, after years of harsh weather, the fountain was taken down. Where did King Neptune wind up, you might ask? Sadly, he was tossed into Murder Creek and eventually disintegrated. This site was then turned into a band platform and a gazebo was erected. To this day, the Russell Park gazebo is a central attraction welcoming the Akron Community Band, high school gatherings, picnics, lunch and concerts, special events, and more. Did you know the paved trail that winds its way diagonally through the park from corner to corner may look like a simple walking trail, but it's actually the Great Central Trail of the Iroquois? This trail was used by the native people and early inhabitants of New York State as they traveled westward toward Canada.
For our next location, we'd like to draw your attention all the way across the park to the far right-hand corner, bordering along Main Street. In fact, if you follow the trail we just spoke about, it will lead your eyes directly there. Following his purchase, Jonathan Russell built his family a house and opened the first store in the village on the corner of Main and Clinton Streets, where you are now looking. The structure has been home to a variety of merchants over the years, including a cigar manufacturer, drugstore, and its current use as the offices of Friedman and Ransenhofer PC. If you live in Akron, then most likely you're familiar with the wonderful taste of Guy's Subs, located just behind Mr. Russell's original house. Back in 1884, this was the site of the Park Theater and Rink, one of the most popular spots in the village for entertainment, which was used throughout the 1960s and then became a supermarket and other businesses throughout the years. Akronites could attend dances, go roller skating, play basketball, and even see movies and theatrical performances. In 1997, the owners of Guy's Subs purchased the old theater building and renovated it into the space you see today. Did you know? Water fountains and horse troughs were installed in Russell Park by the Women's Christian Temperance Union in the early 1900s to urge people to drink water, not alcohol. You can still see the actual drinking fountain near the pavilion in the park.
The next historic site in our village square is located to the left of your car, the Denio Memorial Library at the corner of John and Franklin Streets. In November of 1906, Mrs. Eunice Denio made her last will and testament stating that a brick building should be built on a site in the village for use as a hall, library, and reading room. In 1917, the building was completed, but guess what? There was no money left for books or equipment, so it sat vacant for more than 20 years. Finally, in 1940, a book drive was organized, and the library operated out of location for more than 60 years. On May 31, 2002, a new modern library was dedicated at 33 Main Street in the village to meet the community's growing needs. Did you know? Some of the original timbers used to build this library were taken from Mrs. Denio's farm just outside the village. Now look across the street from the Denio Library at the Maple Lawn Cemetery located on the corner of John and Franklin Streets. The Maple Lawn Cemetery was also built on land donated by Jonathan Russell and was the first cemetery in the village of Akron. Many of the village founders are buried here. However, Jonathan Russell is actually not buried here. He left Akron sometime in the 1850s for Michigan. One of the oldest stones is that of Jonathan Delano, owner of Akron's first cement factory. We'll describe him in greater detail as our tour progresses. There are a number of early villagers buried in the cemetery, as well as veterans from the Revolutionary War, War of 1812, Mexican War, and Civil War, including a soldier from the Battle of Gettysburg. Back in the day, there were a number of fancy and stately markers throughout the cemetery, and in the early 2000s, a beautiful wrought iron fence was erected by the Lions Club to protect the remaining graves. You are welcome to get out of your vehicle and explore the site. Did you know a small tornado hit the cemetery and caused minor damage many years ago?
Please turn your attention across from the Maple Lawn Cemetery to the C.D. Wright Community Center on the corner of John and Church Streets. For all of the students on this tour, you'll be thrilled to know that this is the site of Akron's first school, built on property that was once again donated by Jonathan Russell. This corner seemed to be a good spot for schools, since the original Akron High School was located right behind it. In the 1870s, there were only 3 teachers and the school was ungraded. Eventually, in 1925, construction of what is now the current high school began on Bloomingdale Avenue. We'll be passing by the site a little bit later in the tour. Today, the C.D. Wright Community Center is used for a number of events and also houses public restrooms. Did you know? The building was named after the well-respected Akron resident D. Wright, who was an active Boy Scout, craftsman, and honorable man.
Next to the C.D. Wright Community Center is our final destination in the village square, the First United Methodist Church.
The directly next door to the former schoolhouse is the First United Methodist Church. As more people began to settle in Akron, the congregation of Methodists began asking for the construction of a church to meet their spiritual needs. Construction began in 1837 on a piece of property that was donated by Jonathan Russell. The building was completed in 1840. Over the years, the church underwent a number of renovations. In 1942, it experienced a devastating fire and they were unable to save the building or its contents. In 1944, the church was rebuilt using some of the stones from the original building. Did you know the Akron Methodist Church is considered the beginning of Methodist churches in all of Erie County?
We're now ready to leave the center of the village. But before we do, just try to imagine what it would have been like at the beginning, in the early 1800s when this area would have been nothing but forest. Our tour will now continue by making a left on Franklin Street, which is located to your left between the Denial Memorial Library and Maple Lawn Cemetery. Continue to the end of Franklin Street and pull to the edge of the parking lot at the American Legion on the left. You may pause the narrative until you reach the spot. Hear that? It's the distant sound of a train whistle, or at least it would have been in the early days of the village. The building to your left is the former Newstead Hotel, which once greeted visitors departing from the West Shore Railroad that was located across the street. Today, the former rail trails have been converted into bike and snowmobile trails. While our driving tour doesn't include a trip to the bike trail, which is just down to the left, you can check out our troup's Akron's Attractions self-guided bike tour, which highlights many of the recreational activities throughout the village, including the bike trail. Did you know? The power station that located over to the left was once the site of a railroad depot servicing passengers coming to and from Akron on the rail?
Before we pull away, we want to alert you to two of Akron's largest businesses, Perry's Ice Cream and Whiting Door Manufacturing, located just beyond the buildings in front of you. Here in Akron, life is a bowl of Perry's. The melt-in-your-mouth flavors of Perry's ice cream have been made right here in Akron since 1918. The story began when H. Morton Perry purchased a small dairy in Akron. In 1932, Akron's high school's cafeteria manager asked Morton if he could supply ice cream to the school. As demand for ice cream increased, so did his business. Today, Perry's, located at One Ice Cream Plaza, is still owned and operated by the Perry family. Did you know? Perry's is one of the two largest ice cream manufacturing plants in New York State. They have more than 300 employees making 500 different items, totaling over 12 million gallons of ice cream per year. On the far side of Perry's is Whiting Door Manufacturing. They are the world's leading designer and supplier of doors found on the back of big trucks. In 1953, the Whiting family was making roll-up garage doors when a man asked if they could manufacture one to fit the back of his truck. From that point on, you could say, business was a roll. The next time you're behind a big rig, look for the Whiting emblem at the bottom of the door. Did you know? Whiting's employs more than 600 people and is the largest private employer in Akron.
We're now going to head off to Akron Central School, and you'll be passing by a few more of Akron's incredible businesses. Please make a right-hand turn onto Eckerson Avenue and an immediate left onto Churchill, which becomes Newton. Please pull over when you see Ford Gum on your left.
You may pause your tour until you reach this destination.
If you're lucky, you just might smell the sweet fragrance of yummy gumballs being manufactured at the Ford Gum and Machine Company to your left. The story of Ford Gum began in 1913 when 20-year-old Ford Mason began placing gumball machines in stores all around western New York. Depending on your age, you may remember putting a penny into a gumball machine and getting one of the tasty treats. The company originally started in Lockport, and when expansion was necessary, Mason moved to Akron, New York in 1960. The Ford Gum and Machine Company continues to deliver high-quality, innovative candy, gum, and novelty products, including the ever-popular Big League chewing gum. Did you know the U.S. leads the world in total gum consumption?
You may now continue the tour up Newton Avenue and stop when you're facing the school. Please leave the audio on as we will be highlighting another building along the way.
By now you should be on Newton Avenue and rounding the bend to Indianola Avenue. At this point, you're passing by Akron Rule, the largest manufacturer of wooden rulers and yardsticks in the world. Incorporated in 1967, their product line has more than 130 different items. Did you know? In 1934, the site was home to the Rochester Button Factory, which made and shipped buttons around the area.
By now, you should have rounded the corner onto Indianola Avenue and be at the corner of Bloomingdale Avenue looking directly at Akron Central School. Please pull over while we highlight the school and the area around it. Akron is the second largest school district in New York State by acreage. It enrolls students from the counties of Erie, Genesee, and Niagara. The original section of the school on the right was constructed in 1925 as a K-12 building and has been expanded upon over the years. The elementary school was built in 1955 and the rest of the campus has been expanded throughout the years. Our school and community have a proud Seneca heritage. If you were to turn left and continue heading east along Bloomingdale Avenue, you would come to the Tonawanda Seneca Nation. The people of the Tonawanda Seneca Nation are a large part of Akron's past and present. If you look at the flags flying at the school, you will see a purple and a white flag. This is a flag of the Haudenosaunee, also known as the Iroquois Confederacy, and the Seneca people are represented by the square symbol closest to the pole. Numerous local Native Americans have achieved recognition in many fields, including E. Lee S. Parker, who lived from 1828 through 1895. He served as a military secretary to General Ulysses S. Grant and drafted the surrender terms signed by Robert E. Lee during the Civil War. Did you know? This beautiful campus backs right up to a glacial phenomenon, the Onondaga Escarpment. The escarpment is known locally as the Ledge, and it runs from Albany to Buffalo, sometimes getting as high as 245 feet. We'll be taking you to the top of the ledge at our next stop.
Our tour continues as you make a right onto Bloomingdale Avenue going west. Drive approximately 500 feet to the first cross street at Eckerson Avenue. Make a left onto Eckerson and follow it as it curves around to become Madison Avenue, ending at John Street. You may pause your tour until you reach this destination. Once at John Street, you'll make a left-hand turn heading up the hill towards the Akron Airport.
Please pull your car over across from the benches and monument when you reach the top of the hill. The airport will be on your right.
As you head up John Street towards the airport, don't be alarmed if you see a plane taking off right above you. Yes, the small village of Akron has a very active airport. The Akron Airport was started in 1940 by Forrest Frosty Thayer, who operated it as a grass strip until it was purchased in the late 1950s by Akron Aviation. They installed the first paved runway. From 1976 to present, it has been owned by the Christian Airmen Incorporated. They offer easy access for people flying into and out of Akron, as well as flight instruction. The organization supports high school aviation programs and makes scholarships available to those who continue their education in the aviation field. In addition to lessons, the airport also offers discovery flights and sightseeing tours. A flight over Niagara Falls is one of their more popular trips. Did you know the Akron Airport actually began on Frosty Thayer's cow field, with Frosty landing his plane amidst the herd? By now you should be nearing the top of the hill with the airport on your right and a beautiful vista on your left.
Pull over opposite the benches and monument on your left to fully observe this section of the town. You are now at the top of the Onondaga Escarpment, one of the highest points in the village. You may not realize it, but this is an amazing area filled with natural resources. In fact, the limestone and gypsum that are found in this area are the very minerals that brought people and prosperity to Akron in the mid-1800s. Limestone is the main ingredient in the cement that was manufactured in Akron and shipped around the country through the 1920s. The area around the monument is called Outlook Point. This spot offers a spectacular view of the surrounding countryside, including hundreds of acres of farmland. On a clear day, you can even see the smoke from the Somerset smokestack, located near Lake Ontario. This monument was erected in 2015 to honor the late Richard E. Forrestal, who was a big supporter of Akron aviation, and to carry on his legacy for future generations.
There are numerous interesting areas that we'll point out while you're up here. What's this, you say? You're up for a hike? Well, if you are, you've come to the perfect spot. Please reference the map provided with this tour to access the area that has more than 1.8 miles of foot trails and is open for exploration. This secluded section is called the Onondaga Escarpment Unique Area. The state owns this land and created this area to preserve the escarpment and to protect rare plants that depend on the limestone. Did you know? There's a small pond found along this hike. It's finally called Frosty's Pond after Forrest Thayer, you now know, founded the Akron Airport in the 1940s. Many years ago, this pond was a popular summer destination for children who would swing from a rope and splash into the water below.
You may now turn your car around and proceed down the hill toward the village, where you will stop at the second stop sign at the corner of John and Townsend Street.
Please leave the audio on.
As we head back into town, you will notice a few things on the left-hand side. The tangled trees and uneven terrain obscure an area that was once a bustle of activity, with hundreds of men working long hours at the Akron cement mines. Remember, the escarpment is where much of the limestone for making Akron cement came from. But getting it wasn't that easy. It had to be mined. There used to be several entrances to the old cement mines along the escarpment. The entrances are now closed off, but there are plenty of information and books at the library and at Moosehead Historical Society if you want to learn more. Did you know Akron has a softball and beach volleyball leagues that play in the area to your left as you exit the escarpment? You may pause your tour until you reach the second stop sign at the corner of John and Townsend Street.
By now you should be at the triangular intersection at John and Townsend Streets. Please continue the tour by pulling forward onto John Street and making an immediate left onto Parkview Drive. You'll pass Nick's Village Deli on the corner. This building has been serving the people of Akron since the late 1800s. As you head up Parkview Drive toward Akron's Main Street, you can't help but notice the spectacular sights in front of you. In addition to Mother Nature's beauty, some of Akron's most unique and stately houses stand before you, including Akron's historic Octagon House. For now, our tour will cross Main Street and continue past the Octagon House, but don't worry, we'll be back to tell you more about it later in the tour.
Please cross over Main Street and continue down the large hill on Parkview Drive and soon turn left into the entrance for Akron Falls Park. As you descend the hill, you'll pass over a bridge spanning Akron Falls Lake, where scenes from the movie Marshall were shot, starring Kate Hudson. If you're taking this trip in the fall, the palette of colors that reflects off the lake is like a fantastic piece of artwork. Now take the first left into the park.
Do you like finding diamonds in the rough? If so, then you're driving through a real gem. One of Akron's most treasured natural attractions, Akron Falls Park, and its namesake waterfall are just ahead. When you come to the first stop sign, you'll have reached your first destination within the park. As you wind along the park, you'll notice more than 280 acres of land, including a sledding hill off to your far right, tennis courts, playgrounds, and many picnic areas.
Did you know Akron Falls Park makes up almost 1/4 of the village of Akron?
You should now be at the first stop sign within the park. If you are taking this tour in the summer, please turn left and descend the large hill. If it's winter and the hill is closed, you may park your vehicle in the lot to the left and hike down. A nice view can also be seen from the edge of the parking area if you do not want to hike down. Please drive down the hill and take the road to the right. This will circle around and take you along this lower portion of the park. Please don't go back up the hill until we let you know it's time. This area is known as the lower park and contains a lake, dam, and lower falls. Years ago, when the village was still young, this area looked much different. At various stages in history, there were cement manufacturing plants, a flour mill, and railroad tracks crisscrossing the park and taking advantage of the thundering power of Akron Falls. In fact, railroad tracks once crossed the tip of Akron Falls Lake, not too far from the small bridge you used to cross the creek when descending the hill. In the 1930s, the Civil Works Administration further developed Akron Falls Park, building the dam, bridge, and also the Fieldstone refreshment stand. The area next to the small bridge that you drove across is also the spot to pick up the nature trail that winds along Murder Creek and up to the falls itself. If you don't wish to hike to the falls from here, there will be another opportunity to do so. Or, if you're looking for an easier hike, you may park your vehicle and hike along the edge of the lake to the lower falls located on the large cement bridge at the far end of the lake. Did you know, in 1947, ownership of Akron Falls Park was transferred to the Erie County, making it one of the county's oldest parks?
Our tour will now continue by driving up the large hill back to the main area of the park and making a left on the park road. If you choose not to descend the hill, you'll continue heading in the direction that you were heading before you pulled over. As you wind along the beautiful park road, you'll notice many areas for picnicking and relaxing. Coming up just ahead on the right is an area known as the Rock Garden. Over the years, many special memories have been made here, and many couples have exchanged wedding vows in this quaint location. During the summer, the gardens are filled with perennials, flowering trees, birds, butterflies, and many beautiful signs of nature. You may pause the narrative until you reach the spot.
Just past the Rock Garden, you'll see a sign for Akron Falls Trail in a parking lot on your left. Please pull into this lot and park your vehicle. You may pause the audio until you reach this spot.
Akron Falls Park is home to several beautiful waterfalls, including an upper falls that's inaccessible and second much larger falls that tumbles 40 feet into Murder Creek below. The falls is located just beyond this tree line, but before we head down, we'd like to fill you in on some of the interesting history about this area of the park. Back in 1839, Colonel Jonathan Delano, a distinguished veteran of the War of 1812, was walking along the banks of Murder Creek when he noticed a peculiar outcropping of rock. The rock was limestone or cement rock and was determined to be one of the finest of its kind. A year later, Colonel Delano built the first of Akron's 7 cement plants at the top of the falls with a railroad bridge going right over the upper falls. In addition to the cement, Akron flour was also produced in this area, with shipments sent all across the country. The sacks even had a picture of Akron Falls on them. Did you know? Before the water in Murder Creek tumbles over the falls, it passes by a large outdoor skating rink open in the winter not too far from here. Even when the weather is cold, The skating rink is a hot spot in Akron. People of all ages have a wonderful time gliding along the endless feet of glistening ice or grabbing a hockey stick for some goal-scoring fun.
If you wish to explore this amazing terrain, please exit your vehicle and take the trail at the left side of the parking lot marked Akron Falls Trail. There are several different paved and unpaved paths of moderate levels to hike. As you descend the stairs, the path to the right is a 400-foot trail that takes you directly to the falls. There is also a second trail that forks to the left that will take you down along Murder Creek and back to the spot of Akron Falls Lake in the lower park where you were just a few stops ago. If you don't wish to hike, you may also view the crest of the falls from a scenic overlook to the right of the parking lot. No matter which trail you take, please be careful of the terrain, which is often loose or bumpy in areas. The hike is beautiful in all seasons. If you're hiking in the summer, you may be tempted to enter the refreshing waters of the falls in the area just below it. While this might look like a peaceful swimming hole, it's actually a dangerous area with a strong undertow and rocky bottom. For your own safety, please stay out of the water.
The tour will now continue by heading left out of the parking lot, up a small hill, and out the exit on the right to Skyline Drive. You may pause the narrative until you reach the spot. Just ahead, you'll see Akron Falls Sport Complex tucked away like a hidden secret. This area is home to numerous in-house soccer and baseball leagues and is the site of the annual Kick It First soccer tournament. There are also a number of hiking trails at the end of the complex that you are free to explore on your time. Our tour continues to the right, but if you were to go to the left, you would see the area of the outdoor ice skating rink we mentioned that's located just down the road. Again, make a right and continue on Skyline Drive.
Please continue on Skyline Drive all the way to Buell Street.
If you discover you have reached the stop sign of Buell Street before the narrative indicates, please pull over to finish listening to this section of the tour. We will tell you when to turn onto Buell Street.
As you drive along this winding road, you are actually following very close to the path of an old railroad called the Peanut Line that once ran through the park on your right side and up to the falls, where it serviced the cement and flour industries that we just told you about. Did you know? The rail line was dubbed the Peanut Line in 1855 when the Central Railway took it over and the vice president referred to the acquisition as only a peanut of a line.
Please continue at Skyline Drive until it ends at Buell Street. As we mentioned, cement was a very important industry to the growth and development of Akron, but there was also another industry that helped put Akron on the map: gypsum. In 1842, a Seneca man came to visit an Akron resident named James Montgomery with an unusual stone he had found on the reservation. As it turned out, it was gypsum. At the time, cement rock was more in demand, but by 1905 the cement industry was waning and gypsum took its place. From that time until the 1950s, gypsum mines provided employment for hundreds of Akron residents. Did you know gypsum has been used in construction since the days of ancient Egypt, where it was used in building the pyramids?
By now you should be nearing the intersection of Skyline Drive and Buell Street. You'll notice Veterans Park on your left, another area where Akron's athletes compete and train for soccer and football.
You may now pull forward to the stop sign of Buell Street.
The tour continues by turning right onto Buell Street and heading back toward the village. Our next stop is the Highwind Horse Farm on your right. Please pull to the side of the road near the driveway or into the farm's first driveway when you approach this stop.
Please leave the audio on.
As you head into the village, you'll notice the Grand Club pole on your left. This white pole with a gold ball on the top is at the intersection of Clarence Center Road. In 1872, residents of Akron were filled with pride for Ulysses S. Grant, the hero of the Civil War, who was running for president. They formed a Grant for President Club and erected a monument in his honor. Did you know the original Grant Club pole was located about a half a mile behind us at the intersection of Buell Street and Route 5, but they moved it in the mid-1980s because people kept running into it?
You should now be at or near High Wind Horse Farm on your right. Please pull to the side of the road or into the first driveway when you approach this stop.
The farm is operated year-round by Edwin and Corky Sutton, who both grew up with Arabian horses. They have operated High Wind since 1971 and are both nationally rated judges for the Arabian Horse Association. Their 50-acre property has been in the Sutton family for more than 100 years. Here, horses are born, boarded, and trained. They can even receive rehabilitation and training for all major divisions at Arabian shows. The facility features more than 60 box stalls, an indoor arena, outdoor ring, treadmill, therapy platform, and other specialized equipment. The Suttons welcome you to view the horses and tour the barns with no appointment necessary. Did you know? The mechanical horse walker near the barn leads horses in a circle to a welcome cool down after exercise or training. Before you leave the High Wind Farm, please make note of the Pixley Surefine Plaza across the street. The Pixley family and their descendants have been providing high-quality groceries to the people of Akron since 1939. Over the years, they've operated out of 3 different locations, with this being their largest store. They've been at this prime location since 1964, supplying groceries and other items, so residents rarely have to leave town.
We're now going to head back into the village to finish the tour by highlighting many of the historic buildings and sites that have been around since the beginning. If you're parked on the side of the street, please continue heading north into the village. If you're in the High Wind parking lot, please make a right onto Buell Street and continue into the village. Before you reach the heart of the village, please take your second right onto Brooklyn Street and continue into the park.
You may pause your tour until you reach this destination.
At the end of the street, you will see a lower entrance to Akron Falls Park, or an area that is known as Brooklyn Park. This peaceful spot is great for picnicking and family gatherings. You can also connect with the lower Akron Falls Park and Akron Falls Lake by crossing through the tunnel that is located under the large cement bridge in front of you. While you're here, take time to look around at the amazing terrain and steep ledges that surround the section of the park. Did you know a highlight to this section of the park is the island in the middle of Murder Creek with a small bridge that leads you across to a picnic area?
When you are finished exploring the section of the park, please head back down Brooklyn Street and make a right onto Buell Street. You'll travel a few hundred feet, crossing over Murder Creek and pulling into the first parking lot on the right at the Akron Fire Company. Please find a spot to park down by the creek.
You may pause the narrative until you reach the spot.
Parked in this area, you once again find yourself by the infamous Murder Creek. But wait, did you hear that? Is it the babbling of Murder Creek, or the whisper of the love-tinged legend on how it got its name? Yes, it's now time to reveal one of the most popular legends on how the creek got its scary and appropriate name. As history tells us, the creek already had its infamous name when the story took place, but it's still fun to hear. This incident actually would have taken place years later near a tributary of Murder Creek, which is located just outside the village. Listen as we tell you the legend of Wild Rose.
In the spring of 1820, a man named John Dolph built a log cabin close to the creek. One evening in October, John and his wife heard a shriek from the woods. John opened the door and saw an Indian girl running towards him breathlessly, yelling, "Save me! Please save me!" John let her in his cabin and closed the door on a man on the outside, yelling, "Let me in!"
The Dolphs hid the girl and then allowed the man in. "My name is Sanders," said the man, "and that girl is a prisoner whom I am to take the authorities in Canada. Her father, a chief, placed her in my hands because she wishes to marry a bad Indian." He looked around the cabin to see if he could find her. He couldn't, and flew into a rage of muttering. She shall not escape. I will find her yet." He then left the cabin and hid himself in the woods. Mr. and Mrs. Dolph then listened to the Indian girl's story. Her name in English was Wild Rose. "My home is near Spirit Lake, under the cliff about a mile below the Tonawanda Falls. My mother has been dead for several years, and my father, a chief of the Senecas, has just been murdered by Sanders. For more than a year this dreadful man had been staying around Spirit Lake begging me to marry him. I love Gray Wolf and will become his wife very soon. Sanders told me that rather than see me the wife of a Seneca, he would murder me and all who stood in his way. My father and I were going to the Cattaraugus Nation to avoid trouble. Gray Wolf was going to meet us there. When we reached this creek, my father sat down to rest. Sanders came up behind us and said he was sorry for his past conduct. He wished me happiness in my life with Gray Wolf. The man spoke so nicely he tricked us. When I turned to look eastward, I heard a blow strike and then a groan. Quickly I turned to see my father lying dead on the ground, with Sanders standing over him with a club in his hand. I flew into the forest with him close behind, yelling he would kill me too. Here I am. You know the rest." The Dolphs located Gray Wolf and informed him of the tragedy. He came to his sweetheart, and together they journeyed to her father's grave, where Mr. Dolph had buried him. Suddenly Sanders appeared from behind a tree. He and Gray Wolf struggled with a knife and tomahawk until Sanders fell from losing too much blood. He was dead. Gray Wolf tried to speak to Wild Rose, but instead staggered forward and fell. They had both died at her father's graveside. Mr. Dolph heard her cry. He found her on her knees sobbing. John Dolph then buried both bodies and comforted Wild Rose. She often went to visit the graves of her father and sweetheart to chant her grief. One day the Dolphs missed her. They went out to the graveyard and found her lying upon the grave of Gray Wolf, dead of a broken heart. Beside the grave of her father and sweetheart she was buried. As the legend goes, if you stroll along Murder Creek at midnight, you may hear the voices of the two lovers as they wander over the new dust on the ancient trail. Death united them in a bond the years never broke.
For the next stop, you'll stay right where you are. The property where you are parked is now home to the Akron Fire Company, but it wasn't always that way. The property started out as the J.W. Wainwright General Store in the early years of our village. Later, in 1883, the Altenburg Hotel and Liquor Store opened under the ownership of the Altenburg brothers. During the years of Prohibition, the brothers would fire up the still in the back barn and make their own moonshine. Over the years, this location also served as a doctor's office, horse tack shop, hardware store, and a sandwich shop. The property was purchased in 1955 by the Akron Fire Company. Did you know, when they were dismantling the barns on the property, workers found the Altenburg's old still, along with bottles and jugs from the days of moonshining.
Please pull up to the edge of the parking lot at the front of the fire hall and stop before pulling out onto Main Street. If you look to your left, you will see the Union Apartments located on the bend. In the 1880s, this building was the Bitterman House and then the Union Hotel. In addition to housing travelers, this property was also home to several taverns over the years. Did you know, from 1830 to 1850, this area was alive with the sounds of progress, and noisy ones at that. There was a foundry, grist mill, and sawmill close to the Union Apartments.
Our final narration in this parking lot is about the building to your immediate right. The unique building to your right is the Akron Ale House, formerly known as the American Hotel and Akron House Restaurant. This is one of Akron's oldest and most historic landmarks, which has been in operation since 1836. If only the walls could talk in this nearly 150-year-old structure. This site has been home to a variety of businesses. From 1836 to 1849, Charles B. Rich, builder of Akron's famous Octagon House that you'll learn about later in our tour, operated a general store on the property selling candles, notions, drugs, and tinware. In 1871, a fire erupted on the south side of Main Street and destroyed the wood frame building. It was rebuilt into the 3-story brick structure you see today. Did you know, in addition to its long history, rumor has it that this building has experienced paranormal activity over the years?
Before you head up the historic Main Street of Akron, we want to let you know that there are a number of sights to see along the stretch. Over the years, the buildings you see along Main Street have been home to numerous businesses and organizations, many of which are representative of their time periods, including a cobbler shop, furniture stores, car dealerships, a jail, variety stores, soda fountains, bowling alleys, meat markets, cigar factories, drug stores, hardware stores, restaurants, taverns, and more. Today we have many prosperous businesses and restaurants lining the streets of our village. For the purposes of this tour, we've mainly focused on the historical facts. However, each restaurant and business along the strip plays an important role in making our village what it is today. Please make note of them as you drive by. We will tell you when to pull over for the best views. However, since there are often a lot of cars parked along the streets, you may not always be able to find a spot. Simply pull over when you can.
Now turn right and head east one driveway up Main Street and stop in front of the Village Hall located next to the Newstead Public Library. You may pause the tour until you find a spot to park.
The two buildings that are sitting directly to your right are relatively new in the village's history: the Akron Village Hall and the Newstead Public Library. The Village Hall was constructed in 1974, but before that, the site and surrounding lots were home to a mercantile, post office, and the famous Akron Candy Kitchen, which was one of the most popular stops in town. The Newstead Public Library was dedicated to the town on May 31, 2002, to meet the growing needs for a larger, more modern library. As we mentioned earlier in our tour, the library used to be operated out of the Denaio Memorial Library on John Street across from Russell Park. Did you know Mrs. Ruby Paxson was a longtime librarian at the Denaio location? Ruby's grandson Bill had a career as a congressman. When he was preparing to leave office, Mr. Paxson had some discretionary funds available and wanted to make a gift to his hometown. He asked the town board what Akron needed. As luck would have it, a fundraising campaign had just begun for a new library. The timing couldn't have been better. The town received $1 million from the government thanks to Mr. Bill Paxson.
Now please turn your attention directly across the street to your left. Located directly across from the library is a yellow building that once housed the roller rink and putt-putt golf. Hey, can you smell that? It might just be the fresh-baked pizzas coming from the Tony's Pizzeria next door to the yellow brick building. Tony's is a fourth-generation pizzeria that has been serving the Akron community since 1957. The first location was actually in a building that once stood where the Newstead Public Library now stands. The site on which Tony's is located didn't always look like this, though. The original building was constructed in the 1800s and served as an Eckerson hotel. From the 1920s until the 1970s, it served as a restaurant and bowling alley. In the 1970s, the building burned and was later rebuilt into the structure you see today. Did you know? During the World War II, departing soldiers would have their ties hanging on the back wall of the restaurant with the promise that they would pick them up when they returned home.
Now take time to look at the building to the right of Tony's Pizza. You will notice the name Wickwire Bank engraved in the stone. You may pause the tour until you reach this destination. This is the original location of Akron's first bank, the N.B. Wickwire National Bank of Akron, started in 1882. Today, that same bank is known as the Bank of Akron and stands just a few doors down from the original location. The N.B. stood for Napoleon Bonaparte Wickwire. The Wickwire National Bank prospered until 1919 when it became the Bank of Akron. In 1927, the bank purchased a site at the corner of Main and Monroe Streets and built the structure you see today. Did you know? During the Great Depression, people would often panic and withdraw their money. Across the country, more than 1,000 banks failed. Here in Akron, the late Eugene Forrestal made a personal investment in the bank to keep it from collapsing. We're thankful for his support at a time when the bank needed it the most.
Now look at the building just to the right of the original Wickwire National Bank. Sandwiched between the old and the new Bank of Akron is the Filler, a building that from the start has served as a restaurant and/or tavern in the village. During the Prohibition years in the 1930s, the building was a restaurant, but after that, it has been the location of numerous taverns. Did you know, back in the 1960s, square dancing was a popular pastime at this location on Saturday evenings?
Before we continue up Main Street, did you ever wonder why the buildings on this street look like they're from an old western cowboy town? It's because Akron was a boom town. A boom town is a town that grows quickly, usually because of the discovery of a precious natural resource. For Akron, this was the discovery of high-quality limestone for making cement. The discovery and the fast growth of Akron happened in the mid-1800s. This was around the same time as the California Gold Rush. The architectural style is called the false front building. Western places, including Akron, were not settled yet, so the people that were pioneers had to create their own towns. When they were building the town, they wanted it to look like the cities they had known back east. They also wanted to make the town look impressive and permanent to newcomers. They built quick and simple one-story buildings with slanted roofs and made the fronts look like taller, more decorative two-story buildings. Did you know? When Akron became an official village, there were no paved streets. One of the first laws required that wooden sidewalks be built to help keep people from getting muddy and dirty.
Now, please safely pull out and move your vehicle a few doors up Main Street so you are parked in front of 59 Main Street next to the building labeled with the year 1991 at the top. You may pause the tour until you reach this destination. Records indicate that this site of 59 Main Street was once owned by Grover Cleveland from 1876 to 1891, during which time he was Erie County Sheriff, Mayor of Buffalo, and began his first term in office as the President of the United States. Did you know? It is believed that Mr. Cleveland used to fish at a spot in Murder Creek during the many years before his presidency.
Off a few storefronts is the Hoig Building, located at 67 to 71 Main Street. You will be able to denote this building by the name listed at the top. The Hoig Building on your right was built by W.N. Hoig in 1886 and is one of the older buildings in the Village Business District. Mr. Hoig, who was a successful businessman, lived just up the street. We will be visiting his house along this tour as well. When Wilbur Hoig moved to Akron in the mid-1850s, he was in the carpentry business. It wasn't long before he went to work for the railroad and then switched careers again and opened a lumber yard behind his home at 130 Main Street. Do you know? This building at 67 to 71 Main Street survived a devastating fire in 1890 that destroyed the entire block around it. Thankfully, the brick was able to withstand the fire, something that the surrounding wooden buildings weren't able to do.
Now please look diagonally across the street at the corner of Main and Clinton Streets, next to Russell Park. You will notice we are nearly back to where Jonathan Russell started the settlement in the early 1800s. Did you know? When Mr. Russell purchased the lot and several other settlers began purchasing land around him, this area was simply called the Corporation. By 1849, it was decided that the growing village needed a name. A resident who had worked around Akron, Ohio, suggested the name Akron because it came from the Greek word akros, which signifies high. Since the village was situated on a high ledge overlooking a valley, he thought it would be a perfect name. In the end, there were 20 ideas submitted, and the name Akron was the winner.
Please move carefully up Main Street until you are parked across from the shelter in Russell Park at 99 Main Street. You may pause the tour until you reach this destination. Built in the 1850s, this property to your right was believed to have been the second home of Jonathan Russell, first resident in the village of Akron. In 1906, it became the home of Sherwood Hardware. If you look directly across the street into the park, you will see a flagpole. This pole was erected in 1942 in recognition of Ed Sherwood, owner of Sherwood Hardware, whose relative was a captain in the Union Army. Did you know? For more than 25 years, Mr. Sherwood honorably raised and lowered the flag in the park each day. Upon his death, his daughter and son-in-law carried on the tradition for another 13 years.
Now we direct your attention over to Russell Park, where a number of monuments have been erected to honor those who have served our country during times of war and peace. The monument standing immediately to the right of the shelter honors those from the Civil War and was erected in 1915. The cannon stationed on the left was a gift from the J.J. Peck Post and is a rebel cannon captured at Savannah, Georgia. In the warmer months, there is also a second cannon from the War of 1812, which was dedicated at a 4th of July celebration in 1890. Just down to the right is a monument honoring veterans of World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. Did you know, every year on Memorial Day, a parade and ceremony are held in front of the monuments to honor those both past and present who so bravely protect our freedom?
Please move your vehicle up so it's parked in front of 117 Main Street, just past Church Street and across from the Village Post Office. You can pause the audio until you arrive at this spot. As we move up Main Street to our final few stops, you will notice many homes with the century marker on them. This indicates that these homes are at least 100 years old. Since the end of 2015, the Historical Society has given out nearly 100 markers. Individuals who are interested in having a house listed can obtain an application by visiting the Newstead Historical Society website or by calling their number, 542-7022. Across to your left, please turn your attention to the brick building on the corner of Main and Church Street. The first postmaster in the village was appointed on January 30th, 1833, and the office was located in a mercantile on the site of what is now the Village Hall. You may recall passing it a few stops ago. This current post office was constructed in 1940. Did you know Akron's first dispatch of mail by airplane took place in 1938 with letters destined for around the world? We would now like to draw your attention to the house on your right at 117 Main Street. This impressive structure is the Crane Ross Century Home. The construction of the mansion began in 1878 and took nearly 2 years to complete. When it was finished, it was said that you could see the spray from Niagara Falls on a clear day from the upper story of the tower. The home was later purchased by a dentist and also served as a funeral home for many years. Did you know? In 2005, the house was again purchased and renovated to restore the tower and side porch. A new cupola was constructed behind the house and had to be hoisted up into place by a crane.
Now turn your attention to the brick house to the left of the Crane Ross mansion. This house was constructed in the 1850s and at that time was one of the only 3 brick houses in the village. The house was at one time owned by Napoleon Bonaparte Wickwire, who, if you recall, founded Akron's first bank, the Wickwire National Bank, in 1883.
The next house on our tour is the Knight Sutton Museum, located to the left of Mr. Wickwire's former house. Former Village of Akron assessor Samuel Knight purchased his property from Jonathan Russell and built a home here in 1854. The home became a museum in 1998 when it was sold to the Newstead Historical Society. Feel free to drop in to learn more about the village or view the many historic and exciting items on display. The Girl Scouts are thankful to the museum volunteers for all of the help they provided in guiding us during the development of our troops' tours.
Just up the street on the left, you'll notice a beautiful White House. This is one of our last stops on the tour. If you can't see it clearly, please move your vehicle so you have a nice view of it.
The Hoig-Bernhardt home was originally the home of W.N. Hoig, as well as the location of his lumberyard, established in 1878. As you recall, we showed you the Hoig building in the heart of the village that bears his name. Mr. Hoig's Lumber Company supplied homebuilders with Victorian trim, moldings, sashes, blinds, and doors as well as lumber. His business occupied the center of the block, with the 3 homes to the right of his being tenement housing for his employees. An alley ran between Main and John Streets in those days, as well as a pass-through for picking up lumber that still is somewhat evident today. Did you know? In 1942, the property was purchased by Hubert Bernhardt and was Akron's first funeral home. Previous to Bernhardt's, the undertaker would arrange viewings and funerals at the home of the deceased. Today, the exterior very closely resembles the original structure, and the basement still houses the original coal-burning stove from the early 1900s.
Please proceed up Main Street and stop in viewing distance of the Octagon House, our final stop on the tour.
A village treasure on the National Register, the story of this unique 8-sided octagon house began in 1848 when Orson Feller wrote a book titled A Home for All. It outlined the healthy advantages of living in a round or 8-sided house. This book started the short-lived octagon fad, which lasted until the Panic of 1857. Octagon houses continued being built until about 1900, but not at the initial rate. It's interesting that during the 1800s, more octagon houses were built in New York State than any other state, and Akron's octagon house is the only one built in Erie County during that century.
At the time of Orson Fowler's book, Charles B. Rich and his second wife, Diadema, were living on Cedar Street. In 1850, Charles purchased the land from Jonathan Russell where this unique house was to be built. It would eventually be owned by 4 families, the last private owners being Clark and Lucille Twin. Since the house is named for its first and last private owners, it is called the Rich Twin Octagon House. When Clark Twin bought the Octagon House in 1940, he had a very personal interest in it. His grandfather, James C. Twin, had been one of the architects on the house when it was built in the 1850s.
When the Newstead Historical Society was founded in 1958, its members dreamed of owning this beautiful landmark. In 1981, that dream became a reality when the Historical Society purchased the house and furnishings from Mrs. Clark Twin for $27,500. A huge community effort began. The local Historical Society's membership went from 50 to more than 500 people in the first year, and a half of restoration work. After countless volunteer hours, fundraising, and donations, work was complete and the house was placed on the National Register in 1995.
If only the walls could talk, what stories they would tell. This house has some unique features. Its first floor is half above the ground and half below the ground. Only 1 in 10 octagon houses have this feature.
There is a 1-story porch running all the way around the house.
Each side is 16 feet 2 inches long.
The second floor ceilings are 9 feet 9 inches high.
The house has 3 floors plus a cupola level for a total of 21 rooms, including the pie-shaped rooms attached to the bedrooms. There are 2 closets in the entire house.
There are 44 windows.
The cupola is intended for enjoying the view, relaxing, and recuperating from illness.
The first floor features a large cooking hearth, brick oven, and dumbwaiter which rises to the dining room above. The maid's bedroom is also on the first floor. Regular events at the house include holiday caroling with a candlelight tour, school tours, private tours, and tours for the general public. For dates and times that the Octagon House is open or to arrange a private tour, visit www.newsteadhistoricalsociety.org or call the Historical Society's office.
Did you know the house has a trapdoor leading to a hiding place? Jim Stapleton, who was the original house historian as well as the town historian, thought this played a role in the Underground Railroad, which was active in western New York when the Octagon was built.
Girl Scouting in Akron began in 1928 when a group of girls began meeting to study domestic and outdoor skills. February of 1929 marked the beginning of the Girl Scout cookie sale in Akron, a tradition that still continues to this day. Over the years, Girl Scouting in Akron has grown, and today, in 2016, there are 16 troops with more than 145 members, including daisies, brownies, juniors, cadet, senior, ambassador, and adult levels. This project was completed by our troop as part of our Silver Award, the highest award a cadet Girl Scout can achieve. It involved more than 50 hours of research, which led us to discover numerous things that we would have never known about our wonderful village.
On behalf of Cadet Girl Scout Troop 30865, we would like to thank you for taking the All Roads Lead to Akron Driving Tour. We know that Akron is a very special village, and we're happy to be able to highlight it in this special tour. Our troop members include Danielle Bellis, Shauna Blockowitz, Kaylee Harsh, Evelyn Hockreiter, Julia Hockenberry, Abigail Masternak, and Evelyn Sutton. We've had a lot of help along the way from some very knowledgeable people, including our troop leaders Dawn Harsh and Lisa Bellis, as well as Nancy Eckerson, former town and village historian, Mary Beth Whiting, Laurel Jones, and Pat Rodriguez from the Newstead Historical Society, Michelle Asmus and Christine Sutton from the Newstead Public Library, and many others. In addition, many of the sound bites that we used for this recording came from great artists at freesound.org. After taking this tour, we hope you understand why we believe all roads lead to Akron. This concludes our tour. Thank you.